was complaining about being an egg farm in 1998 compared to what they are now, which is just shocking. Yeah.
I can't watch it anymore. I've stopped watching. I cannot watch this season. I made it through the first two. This third one, I got through 5 minutes or 10 minutes of the first episode, and I'm done.
Yeah,
You just
I mean, I
can't
never watched any of it
bear
because it
it.
looks so appalling, but I heard
Mhm.
Maureen Callahan's description of some of the scenes, and I was like, this is like legitimately vile and disgusting. I mean, these women are in their 60s.
Hmm.
Like, this is
Hmm.
so undignified. How can they be
Hmm.
putting themselves through this?
What is
I
there
mean,
like
the
a
Hmm.
original show was
there's a
bad
new
enough.
Sex in the City? Is that what there is? A new
Yeah,
one?
it's a reboot.
I don't know.
Oh, with
Yeah.
the same old ladies?
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
Third season.
except for Kim
First, yeah.
Cattrall. Kim Cattrall's not there anymore. But yes,
She
the
she
rest of
turned out to
them.
be the classy one of the bunch.
Weird. Okay, that's super weird. Well, hello everybody. Happy Monday. It's June 9th, and this is the Solid Ground live stream. I'm Leslie Elliott Boyce. I'm joined by Dr. Erin Kinsfater, Christine Siefenwalk, Deborah Knox, Jenny Holland, and today we are also joined by Naomi Best. Naomi just put a really fantastic article out. It's in the Wall Street Journal. Let me see if I can get the exact name. Naomi, you might know it off the top of your head.
I didn't write the title,
Okay.
so
Santa Clara's. It's the title that they've gone with. Santa Clara University's Crazy Idea of Human Sexuality is the one that I am looking at. And Naomi is a graduate student in a counseling program where what they are teaching counselors is such a departure from what we would understand culturally to be acceptable and appropriate. It is pretty radical stuff, and at a Christian university, no less, a Catholic university. So I am excited to have the opportunity to speak with you, Naomi, today. And before we get going, I want to ask Naomi to tell some of her background. But Deborah, do you want to introduce Solid Ground for anybody who's watching?
Sure. Oh, and by the way, do you want to tell people about your group? I posted it, but maybe right now.
Oh, yeah. So if you are in my Solid Ground group, we are meeting today instead of on Thursday as usual. So please check out the link. And before you go, Deborah, I'm going to introduce one other person who's going to join us and get her on. Laura Howe. Great to see you, Laura. Thanks for joining us today.
I'm here.
Yeah, Laura is a UK counselor, and we had a fantastic conversation about a week or so ago that I just put on this channel, and so I thought she'd be a great person to include in this dialogue. So thanks so much for being here, Laura. And Deborah, if you want to go ahead and introduce Solid Ground real quick.
Sure. Solid Ground is a peer support community for anyone concerned about the imposition of critical social justice and/or authoritarian measures such as medical mandates in their workplace, university, children's schools, or community. We offer weekly online peer support groups in which members share ideas, thoughts, and support for how to navigate the impact of these ideologies and answer the question, where do we go from here? You can join our peer support groups for $10 a month, and you can join our forum on locals for just $5 a month. To join our peer support groups, please visit us at our Solid Ground Substack. Please note that Solid Ground does not provide psychotherapy or legal advice, and nothing we do should be construed as such.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Deborah. This is a big old lineup today, and I wish I could put names on the screen, but this thing is malfunctioning and giving everybody the wrong name, so it would actually confuse you more than it helps. So we're just going to get started and try to manage a lot of voices. But Naomi, I was really actually stunned to hear the kind of things that were being taught in your counseling human sexuality class. Would you care to kind of walk us through that a little bit and describe what your experience was like?
Yeah, absolutely. So to give a bit of background, I'm Naomi Epps Best. I go by Naomi Best. I'm a graduate counseling psychology student at Santa Clara University, which is a Catholic Jesuit institution in California's Bay Area. And one of the required courses to graduate is called Human Sexuality. So in summer of last year, in 2024, I enrolled in the course and immediately dug into the syllabus and discovered that the final exam was a comprehensive sexual autobiography. So we were asked to discuss things like, when did we first start masturbating? just detail our sexual past and present. What are our erotic goals for the future? How will we achieve such things? How will our sexual past and present affect the work that we do as therapists? And this was meant to be 8 to 10 pages for the final exam. So I had an objection to that because in my plain reading of the APA ethics codes, that violates ethics code 7.04 related to required student disclosure, especially regarding their sexual experiences. So I raised all of these concerns in good faith to the professor, the chair, the dean, the provost, the president, the Title IX office, campus ministry. I shared that with him as well. And I was essentially told it doesn't matter, and I could drop the course and take it with somebody else. Now, I was also, sorry, that's my child. I was also required in that section of the course to read sadomasochistic erotica, depicting gang sex is a term to use, but gang sex as a form of punishment for a submissive taking off her collar. And then also a pornographic illustration guide that was written as revenge for the author's Christian upbringing. So I was told to drop the course, which I did. And when I re-enrolled, I pursued the accommodation that the chair said Muslim students had received, which was to take the course remotely. Instead, the new professor told me that it would all be handled professionally. There would be no required sexual disclosures. And admittedly, I said, okay, fine, I'll take it in person. Well, what I discovered was an extremely hostile learning environment of a sexual nature. We were played videos of bondage tutorials and a sex dungeon tour, where a woman was flogged, ball gagged, had a knife drug across her neck, electroshocked, and then wrapped in plastic, made to jump up and down to be humiliated. And I actually found it so disturbing that I stood up and walked out and requested again for the same accommodation that Muslims were provided to take the course remotely. I was again denied. I was told that I could drop the course or they would drop it for me, and that this was a one-time exception. But at this point, this is so egregious. It's such a violation of APA ethics codes, such a violation of students' rights, that I couldn't take the one-time exception. I have to stand up for students who I know are being coerced, and I have to stand up for future clients who will be served by these clinicians one day. So I published in the Wall Street Journal.
Amazing. Amazing. I mean, my human sexuality course in my graduate program was pretty bad. And it was, I mean, we talked about dismantling heteronormativity and that heteronormativity was this bad thing. But just hearing you using what I am imagining are like bondage words, like BDSM words. I don't know these words, and you've been taught them, like these kinds of phrases, like a submissive. Like I know I can kind of feel what that might be, but this is a required thing for you as a counselor now to understand. And that's, I don't know, how does that strike you guys? The erotic goals thing too. It's incredible. What is an erotic goal?
I mean, I could just quickly say, although I'm not licensed, there is specific licensing as a sex therapist in Florida where I work. I have not pursued that, but my practice has always been set up around helping people with sexual issues. So I see a number of people who are struggling clinically with these kinds of issues, and none of them are would require deep reflection on a therapist's own sexual practices or anything like that. It's maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, the discomfort level maybe at the beginning is 3, because you frequently ask clients about masturbation behavior, but which is not, it's not something that comes up easily in conversation with people to ask about that, but it's really important, especially when you're working with couples. But that's not anything that requires watching bondage videos or disclosure. And I have a few patients who, maybe are into that stuff a little bit, but they never ask me about it. They never, I neither ask them nor do they volunteer to describe these things in any kind of graphic detail. It's just what you've been through, Miss Best, just strikes me as just completely unnecessary, and it sounds strikingly like it's meant to gratify the needs of the
Mm-hmm.
professor.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so bizarre.
Yeah, Christine and Laura, you're also counselors. And how does this strike you in terms of your training and your experience in working with clients?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Aaron. I don't think there's any case or scenario, whether as a professor or as a clinical supervisor or as a clinician, that this would ever be something that would be required to explore or to pursue in order to be able to help or support somebody that's coming in with sexual issues. And I've had a few clients, it's not my area of specialty, but I've had a few clients that came in that had, issues with maybe some sexual addiction and, you know,
Yeah.
porn addiction, things of that nature. But the requirement for a person to be able to help them on a clinical level does not require an extensive look at your own sexual history. And that's the very first thing I thought, Aaron, I agree with you, was that this was done for the professor's sexual gratification in some weird and twisted way. Does that have something to do with it? That's something that came across to me. What I do remember is having been invited to teach a human sexuality course at the school before I left my position, my post, and I refused. I did not look at the entire curriculum, but what I did learn was that they were not allowed to discuss straight male sexuality. That's one thing that was
Oh
off
my
limits. So
God.
all of it, yes, they were not allowed to discuss that. And so everything needed to be, kind of kink or whatever other outside of the box, but nothing that was considered to be a natural sexual response or sexual experience of a heterosexual male. And that, before I even looked at curriculum alone, turned me off immediately. But I would not be surprised if Antioch University itself, where I used to teach, would have some kind of activity like that, because they're very into having you write your history, whether it's your trauma history, whatever history you have, as part of your assignments for, self-exploration as you're studying to be a therapist. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that there.
Laura, what about you? Uh-oh, Laura, you're muted. Yep. Still muted. There she goes. Guest has muted themselves, it says. There we go. Try again. No. Okay, we'll move on and see if you can get that figured out. Jenny, do you have any thoughts?
Can you hear me now?
Yep. Oh, yes,
there you
Laura.
are.
Yeah, there you are. Great.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I'm having a few flaws over here at Laura Howe HQ. So I'm so sorry to hear of your experience. I mean, I just can't imagine going through something being even asked, invited, I guess, to speak about something so profoundly personal. And the first thing that I thought about is sort of, when in terms of your relationship with your children, that ideally children are left alone to work out in their own pace, that it's a profoundly personal, I don't know, organic process, ideally, that each of us go through, that we have. And this for me just highlights where we are collectively in terms of sex and sexuality, and the strange material that's being forced upon us in a widespread way. For me, there was nothing on my course whatsoever about sex, so it was completely absent from the entire 3 years of training that I did. I don't think the word sex was ever mentioned once, so I had something of a completely opposite experience. It's like my course had absolutely nothing to offer on the subject. Yes, so I don't know. I'm just quite baffled, to be completely honest, about Naomi's experience. I can't imagine what that would be like. I'm assuming that it was, sort of 10, 20, 30 students all being asked to disclose this kind of information, and it just seems just flat out wrong.
Can I ask a question? Naomi, when you said that you went to all of the administration and the ministry, what was their attitude towards you, in particular the ministry? How did they treat you?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So Father John McGary, who's no longer with the university, maybe he put his 2 weeks in after our Zoom call. He was shocked. He was baffled, but he wasn't in a place of advocacy for me. He offered prayer. He suggested that I pray. But that was the extent of it. And I was showing him a pornographic illustration guide that includes, I will share, it includes bestiality, discusses what sort of lubrication you should use when having sex with a specific type of animal, because it's something to do with one of their stomachs, one type of animal's
Are you
tolerate, like oil-based lube or something. I don't know.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that was disturbing. And I shared this image that was in my textbook of a man, and God, it was depicting a man with God holding puppet strings, his hands, and then the devil from below pulling on his erect phallus. And I'm just desperate at this point.
Oh my gosh.
Like, somebody please acknowledge how ridiculous this is, that I am paying for this education in human sexuality, because we all agree human sexuality is a core part of what it means to be human. It's super intimate. And I would never suggest that I'm uncomfortable with discussing human sexuality. In fact, I think it's crucially important to have a good understanding of that and be able to discuss it openly as a therapist in training. However, the material that they're presenting is not meant to inspire dialogue about the meaning of sexuality. It was meant to titillate. And I find that both unethical and also just inexcusable from a profession, or from a university of this caliber.
It's interesting. There's been this kind of this weird reversal in therapy, where therapy has turned into education, whereby when you are meeting with a patient, it's expected that you are going to educate them in such a way that they are indoctrinated into critical social justice or queer theory. And education has turned into therapy, whereby you are exploring all of the intimate details and corners of students' lives. And
Yeah.
the metaphor doesn't exactly work. But I might ask a patient about their sexual history. I mean, I do that every day, and but it's just not required in education. One of the things I would say is that there's a very rich literature about things like I don't know, compulsive sexual behavior, um, pornography addiction, um, uh, loss of interest in sex, and these are all very well written journal quality articles exploring these issues. And I don't understand why that literature would not form the backbone of a class uh, on human sexuality for therapists, like looking at these everyday issues uh, that people struggle with. Sexual pain. I could go on and on about these. Sex therapy is actually a little bit boring. It's not titillating in any way, and yet here it is where it's being turned into this kind of spectacle. But there is, I also think there's something to just to reiterate. It's as if the current sexual or current counselor education training is the education is for the patients so that they get indoctrinated into CRT, and the therapy for the students is like it's a pseudo therapy that's designed to break down
Mm-hmm.
the guardrails or the normal boundaries that would keep budding therapists from indoctrinating their patients. And so I think that's why education became like therapy and therapy became like education.
You know,
But
Aaron,
it
when I was studying counseling training, when I was in counseling training, I they talked a lot about psychoeducation as being one of the major functions of counseling. So, which basically means that you're there to help your clients understand what good and normal living is. So, basically educate them about what norms are around this area of mental health given whatever it might be. So a big part of what we were being taught to do was provide that so-called psychoeducation to people. So when I took a human sexuality course, I was eager to learn, okay, as a counselor, how do I help clients understand normalcy and healthy sexual behavior and sexual relationships? And what I got instead was anything goes. Unless it's bothering the client, it shouldn't bother you. You shouldn't even, I mean, so we were, I've used this example before, I'll use it again, but it's still not nearly as shocking as what Naomi's being taught a couple of years later. So this was like 2020, 2021. And my human sexuality professor told us about a client that she had who revealed to her that he was doing scat porn. And I didn't know what that was, but you can put it together from the words. You can figure out what that must be. And her whole message to us was, don't laugh if your clients tell you things like this. You have to be able to be supportive of your client. So from what she was saying to down the line, what you were being exposed to, Naomi, it seems like what they're trying to do is just basically desensitize you to the whole gamut of sexual potentiality, so that you've seen it all and you're there to embrace the erotic goals of your clients without judgment. So they're basically training you to be utterly devoid of moral judgment in regard to sexuality.
Yes. And I will say told directly by my department chair that this course serves as an inoculation to sexual content. So I think that's expressly the goal. It's to desensitize us. And that coupled with the new sexual ethic that is being promoted by our culture at large, I think, but especially in this program, that consent is the only thing that matters in your sexual ethic. That as long as it's two consenting adults or an animal, which, okay.
Oh God.
I'll back up. They never said that, but that was in the textbook. That it's okay, and that I should be desensitized to that. So I think you're exactly right, Leslie. Yeah.
And I think part of it is this whole sex positivity movement, and it's again colored under this umbrella of being something that's positive, that we should be able to, enjoy our bodies and, the people that we're with and whatever. And this movement is really about normalizing this kind of behavior, and it's about normalizing kink behavior. It's about normalizing things that are really not things that are perverse, that I would use that word maybe a little bit strongly, but I would use that word, things that are perverse. And that normalization is kind of under the guise of that movement. And that's part of what is wrong with this whole critical kind of theory situation, is that things are being normalized and people are being groomed into believing that this is normal, in an attempt to make it, accepted, in some way promote it. So that sex positivity movement, I think, has a lot to do with why these kinds of things are normalized that shouldn't be.
And there are times. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Jenny.
I just want to make the point. Bestiality is illegal, right? Am I wrong? It's illegal.
It is illegal, technically.
It is not legal. That's all I had to say. Sorry.
Yes. No, you're right, Jenny. You're right.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that, there are, the vast majority of sexual problems, and I agree, sex doesn't get talked about enough because it's a huge force in people's life, and a lot of people have some difficulties, and but hardly any of them are unusual or what might be considered kink. Occasionally, when there are things that might be considered, what's that class of disorder, the parasexual disorders? I forget, but occasionally a patient will bring in something that's a little bit unusual, but usually that what's going on that's unusual is tied to some kind of trauma. Now, I don't mean to suggest that unusual sexual behaviors are always a symptom of some kind of trauma or some kind of psychological syndrome. I don't wish to make that assertion. But what I will say is that that those might play a part in a bigger picture that is filled with pain and overwhelming fear. And celebrating that is not the right response. Uh, maybe not being shocked by it or judgy. Certainly, no counselor would advocate for that. But like holding a parade about it, or saying, "Oh, you go," or whatever, that is absolutely not the right response. The other thing that I just wanted to bring up is that in this training that Naomi is discussing and disclosing one's creating a personal sexual journal. The other thing that's really strikes me as bizarre about this is the one thing that should be taught in a human sexuality class for therapists is boundaries, and maintaining boundaries, because we are playing around with the libido and the libido is a really powerful force, and if erotic transference arises, for example, a therapist has to be able to have enough distance from it, and enough sort of objective removal from what's going on, um, to be able to handle that sort of thing professionally. And
Mm-hmm.
and what helps them with that is the formation of like a solid boundary, a solid understanding of the professional role versus the personal role. And when there are class assignments that require someone to essentially um, have no boundaries between themselves and classmates or themselves and the professor, that just strikes me as a bizarre and completely backwards method for training competent professionals who are going to be able to have an informed, safe, and therapeutic conversation with patients about sexual issues.
You know,
So that's my soapbox.
Aaron, I was thinking as you were talking about that, kind of goes back to the question that I had when I was going into a human sexuality course. Like, what is a counselor to anchor any kind of advice or frame that they're offering a person about healthy sexuality if all we're left with is consent? If all we're left with is as long as you're legally able to give consent and you do, then everything is fine, whatever it is. There's nothing that's more healthy than another thing. It could be multiple partners at one time. It could be whips and chains. It could be animals. It can be whatever it is. And it's all the same as a man and a woman in a marital relationship. It's all the same. And so I'm kind of curious, like, Laura, from your perspective as a counselor, what could we do different? What would be the frame that people could offer instead of this kind of sexology frame of, well, what we do with our bodies is all good, right? And it's only the shame that's bad.
I don't know. I did the place I come to from this stuff is that you have to work out. I mean, it goes against the principles of what I've come to understand, not just professionally but personally about sex, in that I have to work out for myself what is right, what I want, what I don't want. And this idea that you would have anything thrust upon you as, you're to accept this as okay, goes against my, I don't know, fundamental core understanding of sex and differentiation, and how I've got to hold on to myself, that I have to find my own, I have to find my sexual self. And I don't know, yeah, to I think it goes to what Aaron's saying essentially about boundaries, but it's, I don't know, something slightly different. And I think there's something about that. So to answer your question, Leslie, I think a therapist who hasn't sort of gone on their own journey with this stuff, hasn't found to solid ground sexually for themselves. I don't know. I'm not in the business of telling people what they should or shouldn't like. But I guess I think I offer something in terms of coming to some fundamental moral, sexual grounding within myself, and that's hard won, and not something that's given to you from someone outside of yourself. So I don't know what to make of this kind of outside, this huge outside influence. Sex is something so complex, and I advise clients to do their own work on that front. I'm not telling them what's right and what's wrong. But you have to pay attention to what goes on within you. You have to work out what's right and what's wrong for yourself.
It's so interesting as you say that was kind of the take of the program as well. It's like, on this area, we don't moralize, right? We don't moralize. Counselors are not there to give advice. And there's something, if that were your ethos all the way through, maybe there's something admirable about that. Maybe that is a good thing, but we were directly supposed to be giving them advice on how their whiteness was impacting them and how it was impacting everybody else, and how if they're Black, they're a victim of society and they're a victim of white supremacy. So there were areas where, yes, you educate your client about right and wrong. But then over here, it's like, well, just the full array, and it's up to each individual. And as counselors, we don't impose values. And so I felt like there was a giant contradiction there. And that was part of the reason I wanted to understand, what is my educational grounding as a counselor to be able to connect with people on this issue? Because I hear you about the other ones. And it almost reminds me, Naomi, especially your story about this sort of sexual inventory and all these different just fetishy things that you were being exposed to. It reminds me of when my kids were in the DARE program. Do you guys remember DARE? It's
yeah.
The drug
Yes.
awareness or whatever.
Very ineffective.
Oh, it's not only ineffective, I was astounded. They would bring home this material that would be like pictures of different kinds of pipes that you could use, how to cook different drugs, how this one is made, what are the ingredients. I'm not even kidding. How this is taken. My daughters were like 11 and they could tell me what freebasing was. And I'm like, I don't know what any of this is because I don't live a life where I'm exposed to this. But now my children know all about all of the different drugs, how they make you feel, how you can make them, how you take them. And it's like, we're setting up a generation for what, the opioid epidemic, maybe? Could we maybe be like trying to encourage this degradation? And now here's this sexual stuff, and it seems like, what is the point if it's not to encourage it?
Can I just
Well,
ask?
there's no discussion of emotional intimacy either.
Yeah.
And the intimacy part of like sexual relationships, the intimate component, the emotional component, that's also not part of the conversation. So it's completely divorced from that. It's literally just kind of this carnal desire, physical desire, without any type of emotional, connection to your body, to the other person, or other people, whomever you're having sexual relations with. So it's devoid of that as well. And it's not taught to include that either.
It seems like with the erotic goals, I mean, it feels like so almost narcissistic. It's like other people are this object for you to achieve your erotic goal or something, right? and that goal is above having like a relationship, which might include sexuality. It seems primary somehow in the way it's presented.
Naomi and then Jenny wanted to say something.
Yeah, I was going to mention, you mentioned your children, and I went into therapy wanting to work with children and adolescents. And we had a sex therapist do a guest lecture, and, she worked with kids, and instead of talking about how to speak to kids about sexuality in a healthy way, about what it means for them, how it makes them feel, the anecdote she gave was, well, you need to be well-versed in this to, like, let's say a teenage girl comes in and she's having anal sex. You need to be able to instruct her on the proper lubrication to use and, be comfortable with keeping that information from her parents.
Oh my God.
And I don't want to take her out of context, because if some teenager comes in and she's disclosing that she's participating in, a risky sexual behavior, which anal sex is more risky because of the bodily fluids issue, fine, have a conversation about safety. But in this conversation, I'm looking at the breadth of my education on human sexuality, and I'm getting a very particular lens, and I'm not getting the whole picture. I'm not getting the deeper philosophical and existential issues that are related to sex. I mean, we have to acknowledge that sex is an existential issue. It can create life. That is crucial. I mean, and it's relevant psychologically, and they treat, in my training, it seems like they are treating the possibility of creating life as a medical risk to manage, an inconvenience, and not relevant that it is, that undergirds why sex is biochemically so powerful for all of us.
Yeah. Yeah. But we're not focusing enough on the fact that this school is a Jesuit school. It is a Catholic school. That is just so beyond the pale to me. Can you tell me, I mean, what is the relationship, and maybe you don't know, and maybe someone else would know how these systems work. What is the relationship between the Order of the Jesuits, who, by the way, are the top intellectual cadres of the Catholic Church, and that's no mean feat. They are the rock stars of priesthood, and how these people are putting their brand on a college that would basically indulge in and encourage criminal sexual activity. Do you know anything about the link between like the actual Jesuit? I don't mean like in terms of like a nefarious way, but I mean, is the school overtly Jesuit? Is there Jesuit some symbolism? Is there are there masses? Is the Jesuit worldview and the Catholic way of life integrated into the college?
That's how it was advertised, and that is part of the reason why I enrolled.
Are you Catholic?
I am not Catholic. I'm Christian. But, you know, I wanted, even if it were to be a Jewish university, I think having some faith tradition is just really important to ground us when we're talking about, again, existential human issues. And I went to UC Berkeley and I got my degree in legal studies, which was a lot of critical legal theory. So I knew that this field could potentially be swayed by that ideology. So I was like, okay, you know, the Catholic tradition will ground us a little bit. You know, I don't know the relationship, and that's something that I'm actively looking into right now. And I'm not done. This is not a flash in the pan instance of whistleblowing. There's things to be discovered here. I'll leave it at that.
I would strongly encourage you to keep going with that. Strongly encourage you, because I mean, this is so these people. This can't be. Like we will cease to exist as a society with any kind of culture if we're allowing the last bastion, supposedly, of traditional morality to have this filth propagated under its auspices. Like that is a deeply, deeply disturbing fact. I mean, it's one thing if you go to some commie college like Evergreen or, you know, what is that place called in Ohio? Anyway, you know, there's plenty of crazy, wacky alternative places to go to. But if you're going to go to choose a Catholic education and pay for a Catholic education, there is no way in hell that this should be occurring. This should go to the Vatican.
It may.
Well, the Jesuit school down here, Loyola Marymount, which I was asked to teach at as well and ended up turning it down, the president made a statement that's in the signature of all of the people that, you know, teach there that says, you know, we are, you know, committed to eradicating white supremacy and oppression from, you know, institutions. We honor our role in propagating white supremacy as oppressors, and we recognize the oppressed, and we have committed to reparations to hand over to the oppressed. And that's a Jesuit school called Loyola Marymount University down here in Southern California. And when I saw that, that's why I decided not to teach there, clearly, because that was against. So the Jesuit school kind of system here looks like there's a major breakdown that's happening. I don't know on what kind of level, but it looks pretty severe at this point. The school that I taught at didn't even say that, and I thought they were so radical, and they didn't even have an official statement on their email signatures. So there is some kind of major breakdown, and I don't know where it ends.
Mm-hmm. Let's find out.
I think Deborah wanted to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, Naomi, you know this, but I looked up the professor. He wrote him in the article. I won't say his name because I probably can't pronounce it. But just even in his bio, it says blah blah blah. Is an assistant professor in the counseling and psychology department. His research broadly aims to address health disparities affecting sexual and gender minority populations with multiple marginalized identities and or living in developing countries by understanding the intersectional nature of discrimination, oppression, and designing culturally affirming interventions, e.g. mindfulness. So, I mean, you can see the critical social justice lens quite clearly there. And it looks like I even looked up his research. I mean, his research has mostly been about bisexual people in China or Hong Kong or Taiwan or something. That seems to be his area.
So it's a personal thing for this guy. Naomi.
Yeah, and you know, if that is his personal area of research interest, by all means, you know, academics have to choose their niche. But I am paying for an education to be a marriage and family therapist to serve everybody, and I want my human sexuality education to be balanced and thorough and without an ideological bent.
Right. With real evidence. Like, I'm thinking back to what, Erin, you were talking about. Like, I got to believe that there's been research over the years of what is what sexual practice or whatever lead to healthy relationships. I don't know who's looked at this, but I don't know why all these programs are so ideologically based. They just stray completely from probably evidence-based research.
Well, the research out there is on particular kinds of problems that people tend to bring in. Like, nobody's saying this is healthy or that is not, more or less. And the other thing is there's really no reason to go into graphic, like, sex therapists don't have to teach people how to have sex. That's not required. If you want to know that, like, go on the internet, or it's on a book or whatever. Like, occasionally, especially with anxious couples, you'll have to encourage them to sort of begin to focus on the sensations of sex rather than their anxiety about, say, like erectile dysfunction or a loss of lubrication or something like that. But you're not like saying, okay, this kind of lube is good for, I don't know, penguins or whatever. I'm just saying, like, the practice of sex therapy and the literature on sex therapy is just, it's very straightforward, common sense kind of stuff that does not require, like, that students be blasted with really unusual sexual practices. And maybe I've already said this, but I'll just repeat: if there's an unusual sexual practice that comes into play, and that's happened maybe once or twice for me, where someone has brought something like that in, it's not helpful to be, enthusiastic or affirming, and that's not what the patients want. They want to talk about what it is that's going on, and your job is to be curious with them about it, and to be curious about, what do you do with this? Where is this coming from? And in a lot of situations, what that curiosity does is it takes away the obsessive anxiety behind the unusual behavior, which there often is. There's often this kind of obsessive anxiety behind it for the patient, that a lot of times what might be termed sexual kink, which I think that's just trying to make something that's often based in trauma cool. But there's this anxiety there. There's this compulsion there. It's ego dystonic in a lot of cases. And so I don't, like, it just seems to me that this is, like, the things that Naomi is talking about are just based in bad and unrealistic ideas that bears very little to the actual practice of sex therapy.
Laura, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I was thinking about, I read Eric Fromm's description of love very recently, and I think you could kind of apply it to the sexual domain. And he talks of 4 components with a 5th element. So he talks about care, respect, responsibility and knowledge, and then he adds giving. So I think if you think of that not only for your spouse, but if you apply that to yourself as well in the sexual arena, you won't go far wrong. So I guess when I'm working with people in the sexual arena, I'd be considering, I consider those things. Are those things at play here? And where care is missing, or respect, or taking responsibility for yourself or for your spouse's well-being. If you don't know yourself and if you don't know your spouse, then you're going to be sexually off track, perhaps. And that just struck me when you were talking, Aaron, that might be a good I don't know, guiding force.
Did you say that Eric Fromm wrote that?
Yeah.
That sounds wonderful. I've read some of his work, but I don't think I've read that one. That sounds absolutely wonderful. What was the name of the book again?
So it wasn't in his book. It was actually from lovely Rick McCarthy, who I think you just spoke to recently, Leslie. He quotes it in his book, and when certain things just stand out so clearly. His whole book was very beautiful on the topic of marriage and committed relationships, and the issue, I guess, a conversation about where we are morally as a species. So yes, that I guess I could I'd look at the back of his book. So his book, I can't even remember the title, but it was about marriage.
Yeah, restoring marriages and families.
Yeah, that's right. It was in there, beautifully nestled within a huge amount of wisdom.
I will look for that for sure. That I'd love to have that on my bookshelf.
It seems like we've got a lot of really rational rebuttals to the way that this stuff is being taught. I mean, just in this conversation, we've come up with a lot of the reasons why what Naomi was being taught in this program and what I was being taught in my counseling program are dysfunctional and don't make sense for counselor education. But I wonder if you have any thoughts on why they're teaching it this way. I do. Okay, Jenny, yes.
Because sexual deviancy is at the very heart of woke ideology. The two cannot be separated. That's why the traditional left, like the trade union left, the working class left, was abandoned and betrayed and actually borderline destroyed, really, by the sort of the woke takeover of the political left. There's no separating the two. James Lindsay was very good on this a lot of years ago, the queering of education and stuff like that. And we've seen example after example of this a few years ago with the private schools. There was one in Chicago where James O'Keefe went undercover and got one of the teachers to talk about how he was teaching kids about butt plugs in high school. There's no separating them, because the main goal is to destabilize the family and therefore destabilize society. That is why this is so powerfully backed. The really horrifying thing to me, and the biggest question I have, because I expect it from woke, is why the hell are the Jesuits standing over this?
I just want to say I had exactly the same thought. Jenny, I couldn't express it as coherently as you just did. I think at the base, the reason why people latch on to this, or why this is sort of a left thing, is because it's fundamentally destabilizing. It can serve as a something that eats away at the ethical guardrails that allows society to function. And I want to clarify, I don't think anyone here is wanting to wag fingers around sex, but I think what we
I'm willing.
That's why I'm not a counselor.
But it does seem that there's there's the erosion of the foundation of society, element here.
Deborah, you want to wag a finger?
I'm just wondering if this, I don't know if this is a way the sex piece comes in. I'm just thinking about liberation theology, and I'm thinking, like, especially in sort of South America. I don't know how much the Catholics were involved in bringing Marxist stuff into, to kind of have revolution. It was coming through church bodies. I don't know whether those people were largely Jesuits, but I don't know if, like, once you let that channel kind of open, like justice, blah, blah, social, and then you just kind of open the channel and then other stuff can come through. I don't know. I'm especially thinking of South America, and in terms of the more politically radical, like, role that in some cases the people in the church took. So don't know.
I was at
Wondering.
2 different Jesuit universities. I went to St. Mary's. It's a Catholic Jesuit university in San Antonio for my undergrad. And then I went to Seattle U for law school, and that was Jesuit also. And social justice was always a part of the mission statement.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a benign phrase. I didn't understand that there was a lot more, that there was an ideology behind that. I thought it was just like something lovely, like we care about people's overall well-being.
I remember feeling that way.
But it was why Antioch's social justice mission statement didn't freak me out, because I'd been used to going to social justice schools. Jenny?
Quick point. The Jesuits were heavily involved in perpetuating liberation theology. And one of the biggest, most really wacky sex scandals recently involved a priest. Yeah, just a Father Rupnik, who was also a Jesuit. So maybe they do have form in this area, but still, they're notoriously sort of globally minded and liberal versus the traditionalists in the Catholic Church, as far as I know. But this is way beyond that.
And Leslie, if I could jump in, I think you're picking up on something that's important, because they use this language like social justice. Who doesn't want society to be just? Like, what counselor doesn't want society to be just? But clearly there's the underlying critical theory behind it. And sexuality it's just the next logical step of deconstructing the hegemonic norms of, frankly, marriage, frankly, modesty. And that's why I think this assignment, this sexual autobiography assignment, is so important to them. It's been in place reportedly since the 1980s. And I think that, and I wrote this in my Substack, I don't think that my values of modesty within my marriage and privacy of my marriage are just seen as suspect. I think they are seen as oppressive forces that I should actively deconstruct. And the university is tasked with helping me deconstruct that in order to become a parent.
That's right.
Naomi, what's next for you? Are you able to continue going to this school? Are you still trying to decide what to do next?
I don't know what's next for me. I haven't heard anything from the university. My guess is probably General Counsel Douglas is listening to this right now. So I'm talking to her. I don't know. I don't know if I'll be able to stay at the school. Probably a character smear is next. Maybe they'll do the listening and learning bit. I doubt it. Personally, I am going to continue this mission journalistically and legally and keep advocating for students who have been harmed by this ideology, and more importantly, for the downstream clients who will inevitably be harmed by this ideology, because as we all know, therapy touches the most intimate spaces of people's lives. And it is crucially important that people understand that the next generation of therapists is not being trained like they were 40 years ago. It's markedly different, and it needs to be at the forefront of the conversation. And I'm super grateful for Wall Street Journal that they happened to run my piece. That was shocking. I'm very grateful for everybody who has been sharing. I've received immense support. I've received emails from students and faculty who are behind me, and I am nowhere near done. So don't count me out.
Well, it takes a lot of guts to stand up like you're doing, and I'm so grateful for you doing it. I think we need more people. It's kind of one of the things that's shocking to me is that it takes a whistleblower from a university teaching this crap to call it out. It should be a walkout. It should be the entire class standing up and walking out. But in today's atmosphere, obviously we're not seeing that. So I hope you are getting a ton of support. Where can people find you if they want to contact you online or follow what you're doing online?
Yeah, my name is on, you can follow me on X. It's Naomi Epps, EPPS Best, as in better than better. And on Instagram, I am clinically incorrect. I have a forthcoming book discussing all of these things. You know, I don't know where it's leading. I think I'm living the book right now. So I will stay in touch with all of you. And thank you so much, Leslie, for giving me this platform and just introducing me to all of you lovely people. It's just, my parents always told me, you'll find your people in graduate school. And I think I have.
Not in the way you planned. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Naomi, and for telling your story. And Laura, thank you for joining us too. If you guys haven't already watched the video that I recorded with Laura recently, please go check it out. She's absolutely based, as they say, and it was a pleasure to speak with her. I hope to have a chance to talk with both of you guys again in the future. And thank you, everybody, for joining on this live stream today.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you.